Good evening, everyone, and I extend you a very warm welcome to this ninth webinar series, which is an educational initiative jointly undertaken by Phillip Capital and BSE, with the sole objective of sharing knowledge and market insights for everyone connected to global markets. We at Phillip Capital are committed to undertake many more such educational initiatives and help the market participants in managing the volatility and achieve their goals. It's indeed a pleasure to welcome all of you, and thank you so much for taking your time out to present in this webinar. My name is Vishaka, and I'm the part of FX Advisory Desk at Phillip Capital. We are a Singapore-based company established in 1975. We have assets under management worldwide more than 35 billion, shareholders' funds in excess of $1.5 billion, and we have over 1 million clients worldwide. At this onset, I would like to thank Mr. Vijay Krishnamurthy and Mr. Kumar Ashkanta for sparing their valuable time and for consenting to be the part of this webinar series to share their valuable market insights. Mr. Vijay is the head of fixed income desk at BSE. I would like to welcome him to share his part of this speech. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Vijay.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Vishaka. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me once again to this knowledge sharing webinar. Uh, Good evening, one and all. And I am Vijay Krishnamurthy, as introduced by Vishaka. I head the fixed income desk at BSE. Uh, so this the topic is very interesting, which is Fed resets and its impact on global markets. Before I get into that, I'll just quickly give you an overview of what we do at BSE in terms of at the debt segment. Just a quick overview, maybe for 2 minutes. So at BSE, so BSE has entire bouquet of offerings on the debt side. Because debt being an predominantly an OTC market, we facilitate the reporting and settlement of the OTC trades at the BSE, which is through the NDS RST platform. It's a seamless reporting and straight through settlement platform once the details are put in. Then we also offer something called as the RFQ, which is a request for quote platform that was launched very recently, say in February 2020, and it was adopted by the institutions like mutual funds and insurance in the from October 2020 and November 2020 respectively. And as mandated by the regulators, they are supposed to do 10% of their volumes on the RFQ platform. So it's a very good platform. The idea is to see how the a part of the market transparency increases, and a part of the entire market trade, a part of the market trade is done through the platform. So that's one another initiative that was launched very recently on the debt side. Then we also have the retail trading that happens on the equity cash segment of BSE, which is under the F group, wherein the corporate bonds are traded, and another G group where the government of India securities and other sovereigns are traded. The members of the exchange have an access to these platforms to for retail trading there. And having spoken of the sovereign, so what also we have provided is the non-competitive bidding for the sovereigns through BSE Direct. So this allows the retail participants again to participate in RBI conducted auctions directly through this platform. You could log into the platform, register yourself into the platform, log into the platform, and also bid on days when there are RBI auctions. And it's a very simple and a easy process that takes place. So one can also participate. The retail, typically the retail can participate on the non-competitive bidding for the sovereign securities. Then you have again the tri-party repo or the TREPs or the corporate bonds, which are also available on the exchange platform to be traded. So this is basically a broad overview of what is available on the debt side at BSE. Apart from this, on the currency side, we offer the currency derivatives as well as the currency futures as well as the options, and we have also introduced the USD INR weekly options which are there. Okay. So this is I'm sure most of you would know what we do at BSE, but it's just that I just thought I will run you through what we really do. Just to reflect back on the topic, Fed rates and its impacts on the global financial markets. So yeah, Fed is a very, very important body among all the regulators or the the central banks which are there. because US probably being a largest economy, and every economic move that the US does, as a cascading effect on the global markets. To begin with, whenever there is a tightening of the say a Fed rate there, it immediately has an impact on the dollar. The dollar becomes much more stronger, and vis-a-vis, because of which the other currencies tend to become weak. So that's that. And post which, what happens is there's a cascading effect that falls onto the treasury, and then subsequently onto the equity, and then to the commodity. So it's typically a cascading effect that has with any change, or any change of policy, or any change of stance that the Fed takes. Very recently, Fed came out and announced that or possibly just hinted, saying that there is a possibility of 2 rate hikes by 2023, and typically that immediately that led to some kind of an knee-jerk reaction in the global markets, which was because it predominantly happened because there was a slight deviation from their stance in March, wherein they really didn't indicate anything up to 2023. But this new thing wherein they said that they may increase the rates twice by 2023, had some kind of a cascading effect. Also in India, wherein we saw some kind of an activity that's happened on the currency market, as well as some activity on the equity side as well. Because what happens is, typically the FPIs start to tend to pull out money when the interest rates in the US go up, because dollar is considered to be a safer universal currency and a safer haven, and the US Treasury bonds are held by most of the countries which are considered to be a safe haven, as compared to the emerging markets. So definitely, we see a lot of impact that happens on the emerging markets, like like India. These were just some of the basic thoughts that I had regarding this topic. Of course, I would now leave the floor to the expert, Mr. Shri Kumar Ayushkanta, to really take you all through this session, and you're here to really hear him out. Over to you, Vishaka, and over to you, Mr. Kumar Ayushkanta. Thank you so much.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So I would now invite Mr. Kumar Ayushkanta. He is currently heading the Global Corporate Treasury at Wipro Enterprises. In his current role, he is responsible managing the investments, hedging, trading in multiple currencies, commodities, financial planning, M&A, venture fund, risk management, cash management, and much more. Before joining Wipro, Mr. Kumar was heading the treasury of L&T Financial Services. He has more than a decade-long experience in fundraising, both onshore and offshore, trading in forex and derivatives, risk management, hedge accounting, and market-related activities. In his previous assignments, he was also associated with ICICI Bank as a trader in exchange rate and interest rate derivatives, with PwC as a consultant in market risk field. Mr. Kumar is also a regular speaker at various national and international conferences. Now, I would hand over to Mr. Ayushkanta. Just one request for all the participants. If you all have any questions during the session, you can write to us at Phillip Capital in the chat box. And once the session is over, we'll take up your questions. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Kumar.
Thanks, Shreya. Thanks, Phillip Capital and BSE for inviting me to speak about the topic. Firstly, today morning there was this news in the media that one of our arm is acquiring a company in US. So it makes a lot of sense to speak about the economy, what is happening there, how other things do stand. Of course, these views are personal. There are some views which are specific to our internal, the way that we look at the things. With that, I'll share my screen. Just a moment. Is this visible?
Yes, sir, it is.
Yeah. So what I'm going to speak about is definitely the Fed actions. It's not about tapering. Probably what may be the course of Fed in the let's say in the next 2 to 3 years. Whether the Fed is going to have a very cautious view, or whether they're going to be very aggressive. If they're going for change in stance, if they're going for tapering of their QE, what they're doing right now. First question to that, whether they will do that. Second, when they will do that, if they do that. And thirdly, if they're doing a combination of both the tapering and the rate hikes, how it's going to probably impact the globe as well. Because we are standing at times where what we believe is that personally the dust still has not settled. The world is still going through the pandemic, and with the new variants and everything else, things stand very, 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 very topsy-turvy. So we have to be very, very cautious, before any kind of view that we share, or any, for that matter, any central bank takes in very stance like that, because the things are evolving day to day. Now, the agenda for the discussion, what I want to keep is that why USA? Why it's just a bank, but why USA is important? Of course, we know that it's very, very important. Probably in some numbers, we look at how important US is, and for that matter, how important the decisions of our Fed are going to look like. And of course, objectives of Fed and target, whether and when. And currently where we stand, and last we'll talk about the likely impacts, what it can have impacts on the globe, and specifically on India, how it's going to impact us. With that, we'll start with the importance of USA. Of course, we know and we acknowledge US is very, very important. But number-wise, if you look at it, the first graph represents on real GDP movement terms, how much US contribute to the world GDP. Number two is nominal terms. So 1960, if you look at it, US used to control around 28% of the total world GDP. Currently, it is around 21%. So technically, what is happening is that every year, every decade, kind of US contribution is coming out down by 1%. So that's where the things do stand. Now, the surprising thing is that if you look at the population of US, that's around 5% of the world total population. Total population is around 780 crore. US stands around 33 crores. So roughly they're about 5%. Now, this 5% of the people contribute to the 22% of the GDP. So it becomes extremely important for the world to look at it, how the US behaves. That's where the thing stands. It's a mighty economy. The other way to sweat the things are, which specifically describes the behavioral pattern of US, is, I'll give a connotation to one of the very famous Sanskrit slokas, which says, Udam tutva gritam pivet javat jibat sukham bhavet. That means in your entire life, you function, you live with a debt, and when you die, the debt dies with you. So technically, that's what the US economy is going through, and that has been happening for a decade long ways. It's like the entire world saves for US, and US is spending for the entire world. Now, if you look at the strength of an economy, probably, historically, if you go and you look at for the last 1,000 or 2,000 years, the shift happens, the paradigm shift. One economy to the other in terms of coming out as a superpower, that happens along with the war. I don't know why I'm getting this things. Now, so US, of course, post the World War II, the growth World War II, it emerged as one of the very, very strong economies. If you go back and look at it, 1930s, the economy spent a lot of focus in terms of education once they were faced with the Great Depression, with innovations, with creating schools, colleges. So they are kind of ahead of the game, and the budgets are significantly higher. Now coming to just one moment. Shay, can you see some red dots in the screen? I don't know why I'm facing this, or it's a clean presentation. Because my screen is showing some red lines.
Yes, sir. Even that red lines are visible.
I don't know why that is happening.
Okay.
I think I'll do one thing. I'll reshare my screen. Just one moment. So that very categorically says how strong the US is. Number two is that if you look at a lot of your commodities across the globe are related to the benchmark pricing of dollar, because they are denominated to the dollar. So any movement in the dollar, directly affects a lot of economies. So you have to be very, very particular about that part of it. Now, of course, Fed is like the central bank of US. And if you look at it, what Fed has been targeting, one thing is very common, they're targeting a 2% sustainable inflation, which is the personal consumption expenditure there. Of course, the unemployment to be low, liquidity to be comfortable. Unemployment, somebody can argue that whether it is a fiscal policy or whether it is a monetary policy. But since you're targeting the inflation. Inflation is a function of your unemployment. There is a very, very close correlationship in between those two. So indirectly, some can argue that, Fed also kind of targets the unemployment. Of course, liquidity comes third part of it. Now, if you look at the red dotted boxes, so these are the three QEs before the pandemic. First QE happened in 2008 November during the Lehman crisis, where Fed decides to buy $600 billion kind of bonds. Then the second QE happens around November 10, which was again 600 to 800 billion kind of bonds. The QE3 came somewhat around September 12, and where Fed initially decided to buy 40 billion kind of bonds every month, and then they increased it to 85 by December 12. And somewhere around June 13, Fed started giving signals. This was the Ben Bernanke time, by the way. They started giving signal that we will taper it off to 65 billion. And that was the point, a lot of knee-jerk reactions happened. And India was very badly hit that point of time. If you remember, rupee was depreciating around 68 levels. But one key thing which need to be noticed during that point of time, if you go back and you look around Jan 13 to be precise, where the short-term interest rates were significantly lower in India, and the forward premium was significantly positive. So the arbitrage was basically you borrow money in India, convert it into dollar, sell it forward. So receive the forward premium, and there was an arbitrage of around 2 to 3%. And so everybody started buying the dollar in the spot market, which allowed dollar to appreciate, and it was also started hitting the inflation of India. And CPI was in double digit during that time. And when around July 13, when new governor came in, one night it's kind of the MSF rates were increased significantly, the short-term rates, and that kind of completely took away that arbitrage which used to exist. And that was the time there was a short-term liquidity crisis, and the short-term rates, if you look at it, went again to around 11-12% kind of rates. And that was the first one of the liquidity crisis which happened, but which lasted for around 30 days. But then the third cycle kind of stopped around October 14. That's where it stopped. January 14 onwards, they were tapering, that 85 to 65, and slowly stopped around. But if you add all these three QEs, 0.93 was the balance sheet of Fed in November 2008, which ended up to 4.24 trillion. So net, we are talking about probably 3.3 trillion kind of expansion. If you just look at the pandemic itself went up around closer to 3.8 trillion kind of expansion till now. So that means this QE is significantly higher than whatever the QEs we have seen till now. Is this something which was required, whether it is something which is very, very successful? Now, if you go, what is specifically Fed wanted to do? There are two things. One is zero interest rate policy. Keep your policy rate zero. It doesn't mean that you are going to borrow zero. It's nothing but a repo, like your policy rates are closer to zero. Japan did it from 1990 onwards, which they were not very successful. What Fed did was, in 2008, they said that we'll keep the interest rate zero. At the same time, we'll start pushing money into the system itself. We'll keep on buying the bonds. And, Fed was very aggressive, and this was the brainchild of Bernanke during that point of time. And Fed just, not only kept the rate zero, started putting the money into it. Now, in a hindsight, one needs to ask a question whether this QE move is successful or not. And now, if you look at it from 2008 till today, till December 2020, the Fed balance sheet went from 0.93 trillion to 7.95 trillion. So roughly around 7 trillion kind of currencies which are printed. But if you look at the nominal GDP growth is 7 trillion. And the year's GDP went up by, in real terms, around 4 trillion. So that means whatever the currency was printed, the efficacy of that printing of the currency to your GDP in real terms is roughly around 50%, or exactly it matches with whatever the currency printing to the GDP growth in nominal terms. So one can argue that whether the QE is successful or not, but also one can look at the other aspect of it. Had the QE would not have been there, then what would have happened to the GDP? The GDP would have simply shrunk. So today the 19 trillion GDP, what you're looking at in East US, it could have been around 14, 15 trillion. So that's something what somebody can argue. So whether it is successful or it is a failure, a lot of things can be debated around it. I'm just giving the thought that without the QE, what would have happened to the GDP? Number one. Number two, the efficacy of the printing of the currency has come down substantially. So that's something which is an universal truth now. Now, the structural issues, if you look at it, what exists in US, coming to the left side of the graph, the orange line represents the unemployment rate, and the blue line represents the inflation, average inflation, consumer prices. This is what Fed has been targeting at 2% kind of number. Now, if you look at it, once slowly the unwinding started happening, I mean, the interest rate started increasing, and then the Fed started tapering the QE, you can see there is a clear fall in the inflation. The inflation kind of started coming down. At the same time, the other thing also, the unemployment rate also started coming down. That means if I marry both the statements, the unemployment rate is coming down and inflation is also coming down. So technically what can happen? That means the new jobs which are being created, those are jobs where the labor doesn't have the wage pricing ability. That means the wage growth is not there. So of course, if the wage growth is not happening, the demand is not going to come. These are the jobs which are not very high paying, or these are the jobs which are not in the traditional sector. So that's something what we can argue, and which is very clearly visible. The moment the pandemic hit, immediately the unemployment rate shoot to closer to 8-9%, and still it remains elevated right now. So other beautiful thing which also happened somewhat around 1819, the total gross debt of the US government exceeded the GDP of US, and it is expected to go up to around 150-160% by 2026. That means if the entire borrowing of the government, net borrowing of the government, is higher than the GDP of US, one can argue a part of this money has been pushed out of US and is being invested across the globe. And if you take the money multiplier effect into it, so then definitely we are looking at, on a very, very conservative side, 20 trillion kind of money which has been channelized, which has been put into the world globally, which has originated out of US. Now, if the tapering happens tomorrow, what will happen? The propensity of this money inflow to the other countries will not happen. But if the unwinding doesn't happen, just the tapering happens, we might not see this money to come back to US. There might be a 5 to 10% correction, what we saw in 14, calendar year 14, or probably the equity markets, actually 13 July to 14, the equity markets kind of corrected to 5 to 7%. That's something which is there on the cards. But apart from that, we don't see major knee-jerk reactions. But anyways, if you look at from March onwards, March 20 onwards, the equity markets have kind of doubled across the globe. So all-time highs. So the point what I'm trying to make is, out of all these arguments, the incremental impact of expansion of government balance sheet and the printing of the currency by the Fed has got very, very minimal impact, and the impact has diminished substantially, and unemployment is still high in US. So these are the problem statement what the Fed has to deal with. So this is just a slide. You can see from 2008 till 2015, Fed kind of maintained its zero interest rate, and then slowly they started increasing the interest rate from 0.25 to 2.5 policy rates. So basically in US, the policy rates moves in a corridor of 0 to 25 basis points. So again, they brought it to 25 basis points once the pandemic hit. So 2.5 to, again, we look at it, 0% kind of interest rate. So if you look at downside, the crude oil prices in 2015 till 2018, it was kind of going up. So inflation was coming into the system, and Fed was increasing the rates to keep the inflation under control, which is very well justified. Now coming to where is the big problem? Where is the divergence coming out? Why we are looking at this kind of divergence now in what is happening right now? Why the market is getting into this turmoil mode? So you just look at the left side projection and just look at the PCE inflation. The March, Fed was expecting the inflation to be 2.4% for 21. June, the projection is 3.4%. So 1% higher. which is substantially higher in any developed economy. So, so again, I'm getting the yellow lines. I think I have to stop sharing, and I don't know why this technical issue is happening, but that's how, the world is imperfect and we have to live with that. Let me, reshare. Yeah. So that's a significant impact. Number two, if you look at the GDP growth for 21, 6.5%, in March, which is now 7%. That means the economic recovery is happening at a faster pace. The inflation is coming, is going up at a very, very fast pace. That's across the globe, which can be attributed to multiple factors. It can be, due to an increasing in the commodity prices. It can be an increase, uh, you know, due to in supply side issues. But as on today, it doesn't look like, it's in demand pull inflation, because if you look at the future growth numbers, they are kind of, remain where they are. So it doesn't, move like that. And then it comes back to very normal. And 23, of course, now the rate expectations that 50 basis points kind of rate hike, which might happen in 23. So once, of course, the markets has a tendency to correct faster than the reality. So once the economy started recovering at a faster pace, what happened is that the US 5-year and 10-year treasury yields kind of correcting much, much faster pace. So there is a pullback of around 50 basis points since December till June. And that created an issue. That's something, what Fed is not able to look at it, because till June policy, till March 21, Fed kept on maintaining the global pandemic weighs over the economy. That means, pandemic is still has potential, and these recoveries are just not, it's not permanent. It's something transitory kind of event. But June, of course, they changed the stance, and market was anticipating this is something which is now in a permanent transmission, and the economy is going to recover at a faster pace. So now coming to the first question, whether Fed will go for the tapering. I'm not talking about the interest rate hike. That is, of course, the dotted lines project now in calendar year 23, the hike will happen. But there are at least enough evidences which are given in the June policy that the Fed will kind of go for the tapering at some time in the future. Because today, if you look at it, what is happening is, the negative interest rate, rather the real rate, which is the difference between your inflation and your policy rates, is maximum in US. May inflation was 5% and interest rate is 0. We are talking about a real rate around negative 5%. So that's highest in US across all big economies for that matter. Number one point. Number 2 point, this kind of currency printing, which is Fed is currently buying 120 billion kind of bonds every month, which comes to 1.4 trillion kind of expansion of balance sheet or QE every year. Now, this kind of money, is it actually helping the economy to grow? Is it going to the grassroots level? The answer is no. There are various reports written about it, because money is being given directly to the end user. These people are not coming forward to participate in the employment program. That's a big matter of worry. So first time in June, what Fed said that apart from pandemic, what they moved was the vaccination would continue to reduce the effects of the pandemic. That's a big stance change. Number one. Now, you have started giving the signal that, as the vaccination increases, then economy is going to grow at a much faster pace. That kind of definitely changed the entire stance, and then world started looking at it. Of course, again, if the rate hike started coming in, the GDP growth is higher for 21. The PCs is again, higher, which is anticipated. In fact, till CY23, the PC is expected to be around 2%, which is the comfort level of Fed and what is Fed is targeting. Now, coming to the currency part of it, the dollar index movement. So when the pandemic set in the month of around February 20, initially there was a lot of risk aversion, and the safe haven investing started happening. From February till April first week, the dollar kind of appreciated against all currencies significantly. But then from first week of April, once Fed went for the expansion and the easing program, then what happened? The dollar just depreciated against all currencies rapidly, and these currencies, like the entire Southeast Asia, starting from your Philippine peso to Malaysian ringgit to going from the currencies like Israel shekel, everywhere we kind of witnessed an depreciation of dollar to a very, very large extent, and this depreciation went up to around 12-13% kind of depreciation, which happened by around May 21. And post May 21, once people started factoring this growth, it kind of appreciated by another 3-4% post this June policy. But again, with the pandemic, the Delta moves, the Delta variant of the various coming through, there is still a lot of uncertainty prevailing, and the currency has kind of stopped. Now, this is where I would like to spend the most of the time in this presentation, this slide. Without getting into a slide of it, let's understand every QE what is happening. Every quantitative easing or the zero interest rate policy, what is happening is that we are keeping the interest rate zero. We are also flushing the economy in a lot of liquidity. So technically, we are reducing the cost of capital significantly. So when you are reducing the cost of capital significantly, what it is helping is, it is helping your supply side to increase significantly. That's point number one. That means the production is going to happen, the production becomes cheaper, money is available at a lower cost. But the other big issue is, the wage growth is not happening. And the wage growth, what is not happening, there are various research reports which have been written around it. So technically, people argue the wage growth has not been there from the year 1917 US. Why that is happening? Because the labor force is available in abundance, and there is an option available to the residual claimant, the owner or the promoter. If the labor is available at a cost in US, there is always an arbitrage available somewhere in the world to go and pick that labor at an cheaper price. So wage growth is not happening. On the contrary, you are increasing the supply side without increasing the demand side. So every QE up to a large extent has resulted by increasing the supply without increasing the demand. So if a PCE has to be at 2% inflation, then the wage growth has to be at least for 12 to 18 months or 24 months, has to grow at a pace more than the 2%. That the wage growth has to happen, or else that this 2% inflation is not going to be achieved. So still the unemployment rate is high in US. Still, closer to 10 million people are unemployment, which is significantly higher. And in fact, the lowest ever unemployment rate which was achieved in US was around Jan, which is closer Jan 20, which is around 3.5%. Still failed, could not achieve the 2% PCE sustainable number. That's point one. Point two, a lot of these jobs are now lost permanently. It's not going to come back with the pandemic, even if going off. So how to achieve that PCE on a sustainable basis 2% becomes a big question mark. So therefore, it becomes very, very difficult or virtually impossible to believe that the Fed will unwind the expansion. It's just not going to happen. Probably, they can taper it gradually. There has to be enough signaling to the market. The market needs to prepare across the globe, and then probably they can go for that move. Number two, once bitten, twice shy kind of event, because last time when the Fed went for the tapering, there's a lot of turmoil across the globe, and it simply killed the inflation of US. So this time we already know that the Western economies are going through a worst drought kind of situation, especially the Western part of USA. And there are a lot of commodity positioning which has happened. Positional trades have been taken. So commodity prices, agro-based commodity prices have gone up significantly. So Fed has to be very, very cautious about it. So this is the big statement. So if we are unwinding the QE, not going to happen. Taper it down, you are looking at a big issue in terms of your unemployment, in terms of your PCE. So wage growth becomes a big challenge. And how that's going to come? Very difficult, very, very difficult. Now, where we stand as on today. Before, if you look at the left side of the graph, left side of this, the picture, relatively one thing is very clear. The Southeast Asia and the Africa, and in part of South America, there is still, the vaccination drive has not happened, and these economies are going through big turmoils. Anecdotally, what I can tell you is Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, all these Southeast Asian economies, if you look at it, these economies, the number of cases still have not come down. If you just do an extrapolation of these economies, the number stands far, far, far more higher as compared to India as on today. That's number one point. Number 2 point, Australia kind of, stopped its border with most of the geographies. In fact, it did not allow its own citizens to come back to Australia. And if they were coming back, they were necessarily to put behind the bars. Despite of that, Sydney is under a complete lockdown for the next 2 weeks. That's a matter of worry because of the Delta variant. Coming to the Middle East part of it, in the last 24 hours, there are closer to nearly 100 deaths in Oman due to the Delta plus variant of the COVID. UK has started reporting around 22,000, 23,000 kind of cases daily in the last 2-3 days. So what we are looking at is the dust has nowhere settled. With the new variants coming through, we don't know how the vaccination drive is going to work. So it remains very, very crucial. One can argue the developed nations like US or Canada, because a large part of the vaccination drive has happened and it's going to help them to recover it faster. But we know for a fact that the global economies are very, very correlated. And many of these companies do function, across the globe. And if a part is hampered, it's virtually impossible to believe that you can be immune to that. There are so many supply chain issues which will keep on hitting you. So at this junction, we are still living with a lot of uncertainty. So we don't know how this variant is going to play and how or what would be the stance of the central banks across the globe in the next couple of years. If the demand is not coming back, which is the private consumption part of it, then again we are going to look at a long pause kind of event. We are not looking at it to come back. On the right hand side, if you look at it, the economic activity, especially of the month of June 21, you can see a sharp fall. So that's again a matter of issue. We operate in these countries, fortunately or unfortunately, we operate in China, we operate in Southeast Asia, we operate in US, UK. What I can tell you anecdotally is that China is very, very focused. They are always ahead of that. There are a couple of cases noticed, found in China, and they have just completely sealed these areas. And every 3 days people have to go through an RT-PCR test, and that's the kind of moves what they're taking. How other countries will go about it, it remains highly questionable. So then technically what we are looking at is closing of the borders. Closing of the borders means again the blank sailing. What happened in 20, the freight charges will go up. How the demand and the supply game is going to play, we don't know it. So the point what I'm trying to make is, if the world is very, very cautious, right, especially at this point of time, what would be the move of Fed? They will take a very cautious view. They will take, they will be very, very cautious in terms of any kind of move at this junction. And one can also argue with these new moves, the demand, what we are looking at it, the PC in US or the sharp recovery, whether that is sustainable or not. Probably another 2-3 quarters Fed can watch, and then along with that, the other bigger central banks can also watch, before taking any kind of view around it. So that's where we stand as on today. Now, imagine what will be the impact on the world if tomorrow Fed goes for this tapering issues. See, theoretically, equity markets would correct because a part of your money is going to go back. But are we looking at necessarily an unwinding position? Of course not. Rather, we have never seen unwinding of the Fed balance sheet or the government balance sheet. Probably what we see is that we don't incrementally, US doesn't increase the borrowing of the government or the Fed. Rather, they allow the GDP to grow. So in percentage terms, it looks kind of low. And a lot of war budgets, war fundings were happened in the World War II when US decided to increase their borrowing and the Fed balance sheet. Those are left as it is. And once the GDP grew, it kind of came back to the normalcy levels. So that's something what US can do. So even if a tapering happens, theoretically equity market should correct. But equity market, if you look at it, has already doubled from March 20 onwards. Even if you take prior to that, still it is at 40-50% higher. If the true economy doesn't open up, that means what I'm trying to make is that central banks keep on pushing the money to the system and the economy doesn't open up, then definitely this money will not go to the real economy. It's going to remain in the equity market itself. So equity market will be elevated. But once the true economy opens up, at some point, of course, it will open up, that correction is inevitable. One can argue that why these equity market prices are at so high. Is it because the outlook of the companies have changed significantly? Probably the answer is no. The answer lies somewhere between the risk-free rate, which is a function of your weighted average cost of capital. The weighted average cost of capital is a function of your risk-free rate. That has come down substantially, number one. Number two, the market risk premium have also come down substantially. So that means the point what I'm trying to prove is because all of your other asset classes have virtually given no return. Your fixed income is a negative return zone. Reality, real asset classes are not giving very high returns. The probably the best asset class which remains for your allocation is the equity, and that's where the money is flowing. But my sad view is that very strong view is that once the true economy opens up, we'll see some correction, which might not be due to the Fed tapering, but it can be for that matter. A 50 basis points policy hike in calendar year 23, I believe that has already been factored into your rate curve in terms of your fiber 10-year treasury yields. So I don't see much of the correction happening there. Currency market, definitely USD will be strengthening against most of these emerging currencies, which is good also up to large extent because most of the EMs will benefit out of it. It's not that it will hit them badly. Second, rising commodity prices, which the cycle is already continuing, will also help the dollar to strengthen. Dollar appreciation because all these countries who are running a trade surplus will help them immensely. Now, fixed income market coming back to globally, everywhere we are seeing a rising inflation. Even if you look at the IMF report, for every economy, the inflation prices is going up. That's not necessarily any demand pull inflation. This is because of the commodity input price inflation, plus the cost of production across the globe has gone up. It can be both on the discretionary, not discretionary. It can be both, capex related expenditure. Everywhere the production cost has gone up. So definitely, no way, attributable to the to the demand pool. Rather, it's in supply side constraint or the input cost, rise that has resulted to this kind of production. But definitely, once Fed start tapering, Fed start unwinding, Fed start increasing the rates, other central banks will definitely take a cue from there, and they will try to protect whatever that is possible. But at this junction, I think we are still 2-3 quarters to go before any kind of this kind of moves comes, because the dust still has not settled. We are living with a lot of uncertainties. Now, coming specifically to India, fortunately or unfortunately, India has much bigger issues to handle. So we are having an inflation-related issue. The WPI has been at higher than 10%. In fact, 12.5% for the month of May. So that at some point, would transmit into the CPI. It has already started getting into it. So May CPI is already at 630, and what I expect is that it's not going to come down. It's going to continue at this price. One of the major culprit is definitely the crude oil prices, which is one of the primary inputs. But also, what we feel is that if you look at the grocery related items, these reports are there today. Almost 30 to 40% price hikes has happened across the curve. That kind of created a big issue. Now, if the inflation is high, at the same time, the wave 2 has hit the rural and the semi-urban area very badly. So which was not the case of wave 1. So we don't know how the rural demand is going to play. So that's something which is very, very intriguing. So, and then the GDP growth, where we started initially the nominal GDP growth for FY21 around 14-15%. Now we are looking at around probably 2% at least lower than that. Real GDP growth would be around 8.5. So it's going to be there. So if the GDP growth happens, then technically what we're looking at is shortfall in the government's collection, but government cannot reduce the expenditure. In fact, yesterday's announcement that has again 70 basis points leverage in the fiscal deficit. So borrowing to continue. Probably best case possible scenario, RBI can protect the benchmark curve, but the benchmark to the spread to the other corporates or the other borrowings, that's going to widen significantly. So that's a bigger issue. Number one. Number two, if the second line says, is RBI prepared for an sharp depreciation of rupee? So our FX reserve stands at 604 billion right now, which is can entirely take care of the debt of India, foreign currency debt of India. So last time when around July 13 it had happened, we are at 275 billion, which are very, very low in terms of protecting the currency. But today we stand at a very, very comfortable position, all credit to the RBI. So that way, RBI has all the bandwidths to protect any sharp currency depreciation. But protecting the currency, if start selling dollar, then means we are again going to take away the liquidity. So interest rate hikes, what we are looking at it, irrespective of whatever Fed does it or not. Independent to that, we are expecting interest rate to go up in India. And yes, RBI has all the wherewiths to protect the currency, so either way they want it. So that's the specific to India. With this, I think I would stop and I would open the floor any kind of questions. And just to summarize, Fed will go for reduction of QE, of course. Yes, gradually enough signaling to happen to market. Fed will increase the policy rates not before calendar year 23. Exchange rates, dollar to strengthen. Definitely, this is a trend which is emerging post June 21 policy. Equity markets, yes, will correct, but major things will depend upon how the opening of the real economies and a lot of domestic factor. Specific to India, the internal issues are far, far bigger than the external issues. So this is where I'll stop and I'll open any kind of questions.
Thank you so much, sir. So I have received some questions. I'll just read out to you.
Sure.
So the first question was, Fed is assured that tapering will not affect emerging economies. Secondly, India has enough 600 billion foreign exchange reserves to take care of rupee. Don't you think that RBI is well prepared to address US tapering in future?
No, I think RBI is prepared. I agree with you. But, necessarily, if you RBI start protecting the rupee, then RBI has to buy dollars. Sorry, RBI has to sell dollars. The moment RBI starts selling dollars, you will suck out the rupee liquidity from the system. So then the liquidity positive stance, what RBI has maintained, let's say around 5 trillion rupees positive, that will come down substantially. So then you are looking at an interest rate hike where the economy is at a very, very bad situation. So that's a dilemma for RBI. But yes, RBI is prepared to protect rupee in terms of any kind of Fed tapering. It's no more, the situation what we faced in 2013. It's nowhere like that. The foreign exchange reserve stands very, very strong.
Okay, sir. So the next question is, in the past 10 years, China was importing deflation to rest of the world through cheap labor and depreciating CNH, but that has changed now. China CB is in the developing mode. Their labor is not cheap anymore. And the labor is not cheap anymore, and CNH is very strong. So the entire global economic system might see higher inflation than the last 10 years. So what's your take on this?
I think let's understand China. We can debate about when this trade war is happening. We are talking about a lot of this things going to the other economies. But if you look at Chinese economy, today in a PPP terms, it's the largest. And the way US consumes for the world, China produces for the world. That's where the things do stand. China has spent a lot of money in terms of the skilled labor, and this is not something which can be replicated overnight. So China has kind of accepted one thing that which is a not a cyclical, which is a structural change, that they were no more going to grow the economy at 7-8% or in 10 or 10% plus. Historically, if you look at the data from 1980 onwards, there are 60% of the times the economy has grown beyond 10%. That kind of growth is gone. So rather, they'll be comfortable to look at a growth of around 3-4% on a sustainable basis. So that's a structural change which is happening in China. Number one point. Number 2 point, they have been labeled as an currency manipulator. They have been they have been constantly being labeled, and with that, the ability to devalue Chinese yuan becomes very difficult, and they have to allow a free float of the currency. They can protect it up to some extent. So yes, since the transition is happening for an as I state to reiterate my first point, the shift happens with a war. Not necessarily war means a physical war. It can be a trade war also. So if that is the thing what we are looking at it, then it doesn't matter. If you need to you need to change your economy from a production to a consumption side, you need your currency to be strong. So that's a preparedness what China is doing. So it's okay.
Okay, so the next question is currently, that is since 2018, US has started scheme and providing permanent resident status to foreign nationals, provided they bring in an investment of 5 crore in INR terms at 2% interest returns. Since it is started in 2018, A, is this move by US related to QE and a step to improve the deteriorating US economy? B, is this permanent residency scheme successful in the US? C, what will be its impact on US and the world economy in the short and medium term?
I think uh, uh, coming back to this residency part of it, I believe this is a kind of gimmick. If you apply a visa, the norms are very, very stringent. Number one. Number two, with the pandemic coming through, at least no more this is a globalization. It is a localization. What people believe. The Brexit, which happened, which is a classic example of the localization, and people now have started realizing the anti-effect impact of the globalization. What happened, the spread of the virus. So I don't think how this scheme is going to play it out. There are so many other things. Probably one thing which can happen is that suppose US is lacking in some kind of skilled labor, there they can allow this, but to a normal diaspora, I think it's going to be difficult. There are so many scrutiny checks which will happen. Tell me one thing, despite of taking the 2 vaccinations of the AstraZeneca, which is nothing but the Covishield in India, which has been produced by SIA, if Indian citizens are not allowed by you, what kind of migration you are expecting? Probably for other, that's the same thing which will continue. Every country is going to be very, very cautious. So I don't see very significant impact of this move.
Okay, sir. So the next question is whether there will be printing of notes in India in near time, and whether interest rate of RBI will start increasing in near future with respect to lending.
See, when you're talking about printing of currency, RBI has been doing it very clearly through the GSAP. GSAP is nothing but printing of the currency. What RBI has been doing it very clearly. Number one. Number two, if you're looking at the change of the policy rates, might not be. Probably they can increase the reverse repo. Technically, historically, if you look at it, the gap between the repo and the reverse repo is around 25 basis points. Today it is at 3.35-4%. So we are looking at a 65 basis points kind of corridor. That corridor can come down a bit. I mean, they can increase the reverse repo to around 360 or 370. Eventually they can bring it, but the policy rates are not going to go up. Number 1 point. But the policy rates doesn't necessarily reflect the interest rate, what is happening. So interest rate means what? Is it the GSEC? Is it the corporate borrowing? It is or the state government borrowings, or is it the NBFC borrowings? So probably best case possible, reverse repo will go up, repo will remain where it is to give the signaling, no, we are not increasing the interest rates. Best case through, RBI will keep on buying on the curve GSEC and can protect the GSEC where it is. Today 10-year GSEC is around 610 semi. It can go to 640, 650 on a worst case basis. RBI will try to definitely protect, because then GSEC going beyond that, it will create a double-edged whammy for the government, because your cost of borrowing is also going to go up. But what will happen? The bigger trouble is today, let's say in 10-year corporate is borrowing around 720 when the GSEC is 610. So we are looking at 110 basis point spread. That 110 might go to 150. So if GSEC goes to 640, 650, the 10-year borrowing rate will go to around 8%. So that's there on the radar. So interest rate wise, even if the policy rates are not increased, still we can see the interest rate to go up. And it's bound to go up, because the supply from the government and also from the state governments are going to be significantly higher this year.
So the last question is, what's your take on the current liquidity injection by China through reverse repos?
Now, see, China is, one thing they have played it very, very well. They know that this year there is going to be inflationary pressure. So if the inflationary pressure is going to be there, so the import of the agro-based commodities, if you look at it in the quarter of Q1 CY calendar year 21, China has imported significant amount of commodities, and probably they can protect their internal inflation up to a large extent because the positional trades and the imports what they have done. But doing the reverse repo liquidity injecting, I'm not very sure how that will play. Right now, what I can tell you on the ground in China is very, very clear about not allowing the how to stop the COVID spread. That's what they're doing, and that's a country which has been vaccinated to a large extent. So I don't see in the overall scheme of things how this will play it out. Probably I can look at and I can come back on this question. I don't have any ready handmade answer for this.
Okay, so we have just one last question which I received just now. It's in the last 12 years, Fed multiplied its balance sheet by 8 times, while economy grew less than 2 times nominal. Probably BCS, the new money has been redeployed in financial assets majorly. Why are you not seeing a sudden sharp reversal on the QE stance by Fed, a less likely phenomenon if the realization keeps getting stronger within the US populace?
Can you repeat the question? I just made the last 2 lines.
Yeah, so sure. I'll just repeat the question. In the last 12 years, Fed multiplied its balance sheet by 8 times, while economy grew less than 2 times nominal. Probably BCS, the new money has been redeployed in financial assets majorly. Why are you not seeing a sudden sharp reversal on the QE stance by Fed, a less likely phenomenon, if the realization keeps getting stronger within the US populace?
I think, look, one can argue that, all the growth in the US GDP or whatever it has been today, it has been there because of the expansion of the Fed balance sheet and also the borrowing of the government of US. Number 2 point is, if you look at the household debt to GDP in US, India is at lower single digits to 20% kind of level. US it went up to 95%. The deleveraging was happening till the pre-pandemic. Again, there was a sharp rise which happened because of the income losses and everything else. Now, if this is the situation, I think the recovery is going to take a lot more time what has been originally been done. So I'm nowhere looking at it any reversal of the quantitative easing in any near time soon, even if the realization of this money happens in US. Number 2, historically, anecdotally, what I can see is that when last time Fed went for this kind of rise, which was in 30s or 40s during the World War times, when they expanded the borrowing, but they never allowed the unwinding to happen. They simply allowed the GDP to grow and compensate the ratio, borrowing to debt. So why that would happen right now, when we are living with so much uncertainties?
Right. Okay, sir. So we have covered all the questions. We would like to conclude this session. So thank you so much. It was a very comprehensive and exhaustive discussion covering all the aspects of the subject. And I'm sure that all the participants would be taking along with them immense amount of knowledge, wisdom, and experience obtained from a discussion. I thank you once again, and I would like to thank all the participants also. For any other queries, our coordinates are there on the screen, or you can contact us. Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar.
Thank you.